Good day, everyone. My name is Kain Bibaldo, and our topic is the typical and atypical development of children. Child development refers to how a child becomes able to do complex things as they get older. As children grow, there are different ways that they need to develop. They will need to develop cognitive, language, physical, and social skills. The skills usually develop predictably and are known as developmental milestone. Developmental milestone is a set of functional skills or age-specific tasks that most children can do at a certain age range. However, we must remember that every child develops at their own pace. It could be typical development or atypical development. Let us first define what is typical. Typical means a person or thing who has the same characteristics of everyone or everything else in a group. On the other hand, when we say atypical, it means someone or something unusual and is not typical. A person that is different from most others of its type. But what is typical development? Typical development, or also known as normal development, is a kind of development that usually follows a known and predictable course. It follows the developmental milestones. When we say atypical development, it occurs when the child appears to lag behind or is way ahead of same age peers in any of the different skills. In atypical development, we have here the developmental delay and the developmental disorder. Both of these are characteristics of having atypical developments. But what is the developmental delay and developmental disorder? Developmental delay refers to a child who has not gained the developmental skills or milestone expected of him or her compared to others of the same age. These can show up in the way children move, communicate, think, and learn, or behave with others. Like other children, children with developmental delay keep learning, but they take longer to develop new skills and they might learn in slightly different ways from other children. Developmental delay may be temporary. In such instances, the child catches and displays age-appropriate development and learning. But a delay may be a marker for a long-term condition such as disorder or disability. When we say developmental disorder, these are impairments in a child's physical, cognitive, language, or behavioral development. This can impact everyday functioning and usually last throughout a person's lifetime. Some developmental disorders begin before a baby is born, but some can happen after birth because of injury, infection, or other factors. Some types of developmental disorders include ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, hearing loss, intellectual disability, learning disability, and vision impairment. Child develop as a whole, but developmental skills are often grouped into domains. In relation to child development, the word domain refers to areas associated with specific skills.
Good day everyone, I am Malaya Rexan Baldea, and as for the continuation, I am going to discuss about the developmental domains. First is the cognitive development. It is the development of knowledge, skills, problem solving, and dispositions which help children to think about and understand the world around them. The cognitive development includes intellectual development and creativity. Kids gain the ability to process thoughts, pay attention, develop memories, understand their surroundings, express creativity, as well as to make, implement, and accomplish plans. Jean Piaget outlined 4 stages of cognitive development. These are sensory motor stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and formal operational stage. In sensory motor stage, this means learning about the environment through movement. In pre-operational stage, children learn to think symbolically as well as use of words or picture to represent things. In concrete stage, kids start to think logically, but may still struggle with hypothetical situation and abstract thinking. Lastly, in formal operational stage, children develop the ability of reasoning, logical thinking, and they think more scientifically about the world around them. In this table, we will see the difference between typical development and atypical development under cognitive. So as we already know, typical development follows the developmental milestone expected in their age. So in 2 months, child pays attention, a child begins to follow things with eyes and recognize people at a distance. In atypical development, it's the opposite. The child doesn't watch things as they move, a child doesn't pay attention, and in 4 months, children follows moving things with eyes from side to side, watches faces closely, and in atypical doesn't watch things as they move, has trouble moving one or both eyes in all directions. In 6 months, bring things to mouth, shows curiosity about the things and tries to get things that are out of reach. Then in atypical development, has difficulty getting things to mouth, doesn't try to get things that are in reach. So in 9 months, child plays peek-a-boo. A child may move things and smoothly from one hand to another, and in atypical, a child doesn't transfer toys from one hand to another, children doesn't play any games involving back and forth play. So this table is just a brief example. If you wish to view the full table from birth to 12 years old, you can access the link in the references we have provided. Let's move forward to language development. Language development is the process by which children come to understand and communicate language during early childhood. Language development starts with sound and gestures, then words and sentences, but children develop these abilities at different rates. So there are 4 aspects of language development. These are phonology, pragmatics, semantics, and syntax. The phonology, creating the sounds of speech. Pragmatics, communicating verbally and non-verbally in social situations. Semantics, understanding the rules of what words mean. Syntax, using grammar and putting sentences together. So one of the most important things we can do to a child in their early life is to read to them. Make reading and enjoyable books a central part of their day. This table shows the difference between typical development and atypical development in language development domain. So in 4 months, a child babbles with expression and copies sounds he or she hears, cries in different ways to show hunger, pain, or being tired. In a typical development, it's the opposite, doesn't coo or make sounds. In 6 months, responds to sounds by making sounds, responds to own name, makes sounds to show joy, and strings vowels together when bubbling. In a typical development, doesn't make vowel sounds or o, or doesn't laugh or make squealing sounds. In 9 months, plays peek-a-boo, put things in their mouth, move things smoothly from one hand to another, pick up things like cereals between thumb and index. So in atypical, doesn't transfer toys from one hand to another, doesn't play any games, doesn't look where you point, doesn't respond to her or his name. Another domain is motor coordination. Motor coordination is a term used to describe the combined movements of more than one part of the body. A person's motor coordination is a measure of his or her ability to use the muscles, joints, nerves, and other parts of the body. Physical development belongs to motor coordination because it covers the development of physical changes, which includes growing in size and in strength, as well as the development of both gross motor skills and fine motor skills. So gross motor skills pertain to skills involving large muscles movement, such as independent sitting, crawling, walking, or running, while fine motor skills involve use of smaller muscles such as grasping, object manipulation, or drawing. In this table, I use 6 years old, 8 years old, and 10 years old as an example. So in 6 years old, in typical development, a child can run very well, the child can catch a ball from several meters away, can properly use the pencil, while in a typical development, it's the opposite. Child does not run very well, continuously bumps into objects, child cannot catch a ball, child continues to use the whole hand while holding a pen. So in 8 years old, in typical development, can do up and down the stairs, balances him or herself. In atypical development, have difficulty or taking a long time going up and down the stairs, have poor eye-hand coordination, constantly lose his or her balance when walking. So in 10 years old, can do all the milestone expected his or her age. While in atypical development, a child or unable to throw, catch, and kick a ball, a child unable to use scissors to cut complex shapes, unable to use an erasers without tearing the page. Another domain is social interaction. Social development refers to the process where the child interacts on the people around them. It also refers on how a child develops friendship and relationships to others. Social development includes a child's growing understanding and control of their emotions. They also begin to identify what others are feeling, develop the ability to cooperate, show empathy, and use moral reasonings. The child also begins to develop attachment to others and learns how to interact with them. For instance, they learn how to share, take turns, and accept the differences in others. They also develop many different types of relationships, from parents and siblings to peers, teachers, coaches, and others in the community. So in this table shows the difference between typical and atypical development in social interaction. So in 2 months, the child begins to smile at people, and in atypical doesn't smile at people. In 4 months, smiles spontaneously, especially at people, then likes to play with people and might cry when stop playing. Then in atypical, doesn't smile at people, doesn't like playing, and in 6 months likes to play with others, especially parents, and atypical shows no affection for caregivers, and 9 months may be afraid of strangers, may be clingy with familiar adults. Then in atypical, doesn't seem to recognize familiar people. The last domain is adaptive development. Adaptive development refers to how a child adapts to the environment and ability to do things independently. So this table shows the difference between typical development and atypical development. So here in 6 years old, the child can go to the toilet without help, can button buttons and sitting up, wearing shoes correctly. And in typical developments, the opposite needs help with toileting and may not be fully toilet trained, struggling with buttoning buttons, zipping up and fastening snaps, wearing the left shoe on the right foot and vice versa. While in 8 years old, can put and identify words alphabetically, can enumerate numbers and read letters, while an atypical, unable to put words in alphabetical order and not know the difference between numbers and letters, take a very long time to write a simple sentence. While in 10 years old, can address and undress on her own, can use basic utensils. While in atypical development, being unable to get dressed and undressed, continuing to struggle basic eating utensils, and not understanding why they should brush their hair and teeth. Again, to view the full table starting from birth to 12 years old and to have a better understanding of it, you can access it in the references. Thank you!